all of a sudden we're like, there's 3 of us. Like, how do you run a company with 3 people? I actually left entrepreneurship and went back to corporate America. We're gonna eliminate the resume, the job title, all of it. We're gonna get rid of it completely, and we're gonna make the algorithm make the selection to find people for jobs. Every moment in your day is an opportunity to go a little bit farther. So I thought I'd tell you guys a little bit about my story before running in and talking about this whole fundraising thing that we've done with Tilr and where it came from, because I think hearing a little bit of my background can definitely help understand why the hell we created this algorithmic hiring solution, right? So a little bit about what was going on early in my career. So 2008, I was selling burial plots. Anybody else sell burial plots? Anyone? Okay, no, I figured not, right? So 2008 hit, my fintech startup crashed, complete failure, obviously. It was 2008, why would I start a fintech startup in that era, right? Like, made no sense. My husband had just returned from Iraq. He had served a year looking for roadside bombs, completely nuts, right? Like, looked for bombs that could harm our troops, and he unfortunately had been injured by an IED blast. So 2008 looked pretty devastating to me. And knowing what was going on in my life, I actually left entrepreneurship and went back to corporate America. And at that point in time, I was literally selling burial plots. I was recruiting, and I was also a server. So I had like 3 jobs trying to make ends meet. Obviously, my husband wasn't working at the time. And I needed to, take that step back in my journey to move forward later on. So after that time period, I ended up going into a venture with an individual that I had worked with early in my career at careerbuilder.com. So obviously that's where some of the foundational aspects of talent acquisition were really formed. And she and I had a great relationship. Her name's Carissa McClusack, and we had watched this big evolution, this transformation of how people find jobs. It went from this system where people were using classified advertisements, and I don't know if many of you remember this, but you literally would go to a newspaper, whip out your red pen, circle what job you wanted, and then you'd call or you'd show up randomly at the company, and that's how you got a job, which is crazy to think about today. Well, now what's crazy for us is that there's been no evolution in 20 years on how people find jobs, and the resume is 600 years old. So the journey for us, kind of started in 2015, and we were watching this great new value system start, where we were hearing millennials scream that they wanted flexibility and that they wanted great days off and they wanted all, dogs at work and all of this fun stuff. And then it wasn't millennials, it was like a work value that was shifting. And so that's actually where we were starting to see the values change. And then we were seeing this thing called the gig economy, and contingent workers come into fruition. And so we're like, well, wait a minute. There's going to be a crisis ahead if we don't try to come up with a solution that solves for a system that's been in place now for 20 years, that people are relying on this paper thing called the resume. Like, why are we validated as human beings from one piece of paper that we can kind of manipulate to try to get into a door? And then there's a crisis if companies don't address the bigger challenge that's ahead, where you're going to have 50% of the labor market work side by side your W-2 employees. So that's where we were able to meet with an investor and presented this idea, like this concept. And they said, well, do either of you code? And we're like, oh no, that's absolutely not happening. So what we ended up doing is they introduced us to a gentleman named Luke and said, hey, why don't you guys get into a room and talk this out? Let's see if this is a good fit for the three of you, and come back to us and tell us what you guys come up with, for the full-baked idea. And so we ended up getting into a room in September of 2015 and really started thinking about this idea of Tilr. Why in the era of amazing, AI and, algorithms that are doing things day in and day out, why can't we put that into our hiring process? And so we came out of that and we proposed our idea, and we said, we're going to go crazy. We're going to eliminate the resume, the job title, all of it. We're going to get rid of it completely, and we're going to make the algorithm make the selection to find people for jobs. Because at the end of the day, what really matters for a job requirement is the skills that you can do. If all of a sudden you actually trust skills over the current process, you're going to expand out the entire population for talent. Like, all of a sudden, when we're in the tightest labor market we've ever seen, all of a sudden you're going to expand that pool broader than ever. So the investors liked us. We got a $1 million seed round on the concept. And we ended up taking that $1 million and actually putting it into building our product. So we decided to do what everybody does and hide in a basement. And we hid in a basement. We started developing the product. And I'll actually show that. This is actually the original lean canvas to start to build the product and actually go through and build our first wireframe for Tilr. And after we built that, the oh shit moment hit, and I'm sure you guys have had this moment when you're like, wow, I have a great idea, I'm going to do this, but it's the most terrifying, gut-wrenching feeling when you're like, I'm going to go do this, because you're like, my life is going to look really different. And so you're getting ready to go onto that roller coaster, if you will. So we had that moment with our canvas. So we were hiding in the basement, building our product. And we had a great dev team that we actually used a team that helped us bring the product to fruition. So here we were about 6 months in. We were ready to actually go into our beta testing into the market, and we actually are a Midwest startup, so we're based actually in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I'm from. And so we were getting ready to go test, and all of a sudden we're like, there's 3 of us. Like, how do you run a company with 3 people? And especially when, obviously, funds were tight, we put all of our money into building the product, building an iOS and Android app, building our web app for our companies, our website, all of that. And so we started opening a friends and family round to actually fund getting the product out there, and we started to, thinking about building our team. And, one of the big things for us is, here we are, we built this algorithmic hiring solution, so we had to think about, our talent differently. And today we actually do have a better brand, a recruitment brand, and that's, something that's absolutely foundational for any startup, is to actually think about your brand from a recruitment perspective. Like, how do you attract people? Like, how do you make it so it's really exciting in order to come on board? And that was great now, but back then, the brand was us. It was who wants to work for us personally and who has the passion to work for us. And so for Tilr, the way that we really approached starting our foundational team was looking for people that were as passionate about our product as we were. And that's really interesting when you're having conversations with individuals. Like, we foundationally want to change the way recruitment is done in America. You know, we want to eliminate bias, and the way that you eliminate bias is by changing the game. Looking at a way for skills to match our job requirements instead of this archaic system that looks at what your previous job title was and how well you wrote that piece of paper in order to even get an interview. And so we had to think about the whole recruiting process so differently because we couldn't use those traditional process in order to find our own team. So the way that we started thinking about it was, okay, what are our core skills that we feel would be most needed in order to be a part of a startup? And so we actually thought about individuals that weren't just looking to join a startup and weren't looking for that opportunity to go in just a fast-paced, crazy environment, but we're really passionate about helping others. And we're really passionate about ending some of the bias that exists today, whether it be psychological bias, gender bias, you name it. Back early in my career, people didn't call me back because my name is Summer. It's not a fake name. My mom was really into disco, and she loved Donna Summer. So like, that's where it came from. And I know, like, if I have experienced bias, as silly as that is for having a funny name, then the real, true, gritty bias is just bad. So we found a lot of individuals that applied for jobs. We did put it on, things like AngelList, and put it on our LinkedIn profiles and our own personal social media platforms, and kind of tried to attract that way. And we started talking to people and really not looking at their, a resume or anything that they were giving us from a traditional process. We just really talked about where their passions were. And, we were honest from the get-go. You're going to have to take a step back to take a step forward, financially. But you know what? We're going to build a really cool platform, and we're going to make a really big impact, and we're going to start here in the local market, which was Cincinnati at the time. So that's really what we focused on. And today we've built a great team. We have 2 locations. One is in Cincinnati and one is in Toronto, Canada. Our product team is up in Toronto. And what is really interesting is when we decided to actually look at skills, we've done some pretty cool things. So for instance, our product team, we look for individuals that mostly come out of boot camps and that wanted to make a transformation in their lives, but they've had success in another industry. So one of our great devs was actually a sushi chef, and he actually left being in a restaurant, did a boot camp, and then did a code test and came to us. But when they get to us, they love like the collegiate environment that we have, where we mentor them up. So we think about people totally differently, and so we've had some really funny instances where we think about individuals as an amalgamation of skills over time. And I'm sure all of you have these awesome transferable skills that you can look back and think about why different paths that you've had that you think you're off your line, if you will, and it all adds up to this amazing career that you have. So for me, selling burial plots, honestly, it taught me empathy, and it taught me how to connect with others and to think about, for us, we call our members community members. The people that are actually on our platform are community members, and think about those individuals differently to find better jobs for them, and it also has helped so much for finding different people. So the number one way that we really recruit is thinking about people in a different way and thinking about okay, what are the basic skills? Where are their passions? Do they align? And then they absolutely 100% need to be all in for Tilr. So when we think about recognition and building our culture, this was recently, I got a 40 under 40 award in Cincinnati. My team definitely printed out signs of my face and like held them up during my award ceremony, which was really, really silly. But we do a lot of recognition for our team. So one of the cheesy things that we do for our team is we do end of year superlatives for all of our team members. So, I think I had been in the hospital last year, so I had mine was like most frequent flyer miles at a hospital, or, we've had people that best ability to resurrect a dog, like when one person's dog almost, passed away, but all of a sudden was fine. Like, so, we do superlatives. We also think about building an environment of an easy way for people to not only communicate, but connect in a more supportive environment. So one of the ways that we started doing this, and to break kind of the ice between building a culture of recognition, is we have a robot that we pass around, and it sounds funny, but it's a light-up robot. And when we do our weekly stand-up, the team actually says, okay, who made the biggest impact this week, or who had a failure? And it was actually really cool because they told us, it admitted that there was a failure, and we've learned from it. So we pass around the robot, and so then the robot basically is voted by the team members, and that person gets the robot for the week, and it glows, and it sits on their desk, and people basically recognize that. So that's one way. In addition, of course, early on, we decided to give options to everyone in our team. And it didn't matter if you were a customer service rep or an intern, you were able to get options from our company. So that was a way to inspire others to know that the work that they were doing was really impactful and that they were a part of the cause. And then, of course, we do silly things. We don't. We're not like a Silicon Valley startup where an individual can get an apartment cleaning allowance or free meals every day or anything like that. So we actually do things like potlucks, and we celebrate every holiday down to Groundhog's Day. So that's a way that we inspire a culture of recognizing one another, but also having a celebration. And when we think about trust, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned as an entrepreneur of a startup that is growing and expanding is that building a way to trust one another is not just obviously good business. It's also something you have this moment in your business where all of a sudden your hands are not into everything. You go from literally doing every part of your business, knowing every aspect of the business, knowing every client, every community member, all of that, and then all of a sudden you have to hire people and basically hand the reins to them and trust them to run with it. And then they have to trust you that you're going to provide for them, provide for their families, and think about that as well. So trust really does go both ways. And it's not just between our employees and the founders, but it's also between us and our actual investors too. And they're really integrated with our business. So this was a picture taken at Napa, and those are our the spouses and the family members of the three core founders and our two core investors. So we trust one another, and we intimately know each other's story. It's not just about business, it's about relationships. And when we think about culture, you have to go beyond just, trust falls. You have to think about other things. It's great when we get to go to a Reds game, especially if they ever win. And so we have a lot of fun doing things like that, but creating a culture where all of our people are individually building on not only their skill set, but emotionally learning from one another. So when we do our training, it's not just about product. It's actually also about either leadership skill sets and also about ways by which we can react to one another. So obviously, one of the bigger challenges of our startup is we have 2 locations. And even though we're on the same time zone, it is Canada versus US, and there are challenges. I mean, culturally it is different, and obviously in the age of Slack, we can internalize a Slack message in so many different ways. And so we do spend a lot of time working on our communication skills. And it's something that investing that time is actually a great benefit to your employees. Thinking about, down to, sometimes it's just as simple as one of us reading a book and then creating a quick training on what we've just learned. So one of the things that was really key for me is, we always talk about this, have a culture to fail, right? Like, it's okay to fail fast. We learn from it. Make sure you share it. Don't fail in a silo. But one of the things that we actually had said this over and over, and the normal mantra of a startup. But one of the things that I realized was, wow, we're telling our employees to be willing to fail. However, we don't give them the psychological safety to do it. So at the end of the day, when any of us fail, we don't want to admit it. It's a shame-filled event, right? You're vulnerable. You don't want others to look down upon you. So why in the world would our people be willing to fail and willing to have a great moment where they're sharing this instance of failure if we didn't create the psychological safety? So building a culture is also building a safety within the confines of your organization so that people can actually be a better human being through this. And so one of the things that and this is a photo of our employees on Halloween. They decided to be the 3 founders. The person with blonde hair actually has she's a brunette, so it was really funny. But the way that we've actually started to building this ecosystem of caring, which is so important, is we started talking about values and about things that cause us to feel shame. And so we've been doing a lot of kind of events where we actually sit in a room and do the touchy-feely stuff. And yes, I'm a girl, but I don't like talking about feelings, and I'm sure anybody in my team would be like, yeah, she's not a very touchy-feely kind of person. But we sat in a room and we talked about, what makes you feel ashamed, what makes you feel, vulnerable, and we talked about it together in a group. And then what we ended up doing is I printed out a list of a bunch of different values that people have, and I said, okay, pick out your top 10 values. What means a lot to you? And then I said, okay, pick out your top 3 of the top 10. And then we actually all went around and shared actually what we value. So for me, family is a really big value of mine. For others, it could be loyalty. For others, it could just be being direct in communication. And everybody put a Post-it note on either their door or their desk so that we remember their individual values, because it is so key in communicating. If you don't understand somebody's actual focus and value, then you're not going to understand, really where they're coming from, and it can cause a lot of animosity. So that's something that we've been doing to make sure we understand one another, and we actually do a lot of sessions with our full team and with little individual pods or groups, our departments, to talk a little bit about what our values are and why we're making decisions for the business or for our work that looks a little different, and it's allowing us to excel. So when we started our business, we were only in Cincinnati. We were testing in Cincinnati. We expanded to big old Columbus, and that was great. But now, as we're building and scaling, we're in almost 17 cities and starting to develop that. So one of the things that I've learned too is beyond just your team, build a support tribe that's actually outside of your startup. In order for you to attract great talent, you need a great network. And yes, I'm not talking about your LinkedIn people or your Facebook groups or anything like that. I'm talking about real human beings that you can be fully vulnerable with, that you can say, man, I blew it today. Or wow, we just got a great award and I can't believe it. Because at the end of the day, for me, I realized that I was an alien to my friends outside of the tech space and outside of my business. And so these are my support tribe. These individuals, I actually have done things, we went camping, which none of us camp. We also didn't take our cell phones, besides we all left our cell phones in our car after we were packed up and going. But we did this to basically escape not only technology, but really give ourselves the ability to go in deep. So all of these ladies are all founders of other tech startups in Cincinnati and in LA. And this support tribe is now like my instant Google. If I have a challenge, I actually message them and I'll get an answer that's perfect versus me actually Googling something. So it's imperative to build a support tribe outside of your startup, because you're gonna get such a different perspective that you just can't get by just leaning into superficial relationships or just trying to find a mentor or do any of that. And then in the same vein, think about your community. I know I'm here in the Midwest, that's where I'm at. So community is really a part of the fabric of the Midwest, right? Cincinnati has been growing its tech scene. We're definitely on the up and up. Lots of investments finally coming into our town. You've got Steve K saying the rise of the rest and looking at startups outside of out of the valley to invest in. And I'm able to lean into my community in a way that I think is very different than most places. So like for instance, if I'm thinking about launching my enterprise product versus my marketplace product, and I really want to know what somebody thinks, I was able to pick up the phone and call a director of Kroger Corporation that does all integrations for the entire company. He's 2 blocks down the street. And not because I want to sell to him, although that would be fabulous. It was more, hey, I want your opinion. Your opinion matters. And guess what? You're actually going to be a part of shaping who Tilr is to the nation. So are you willing to give me some feedback? And he absolutely was. And we do it to a lot of different corporations. We talk to Procter & Gamble all the time. They literally are across the street from our headquarters. So we lean into our community because we value opinions, and it makes the world of difference for our company to accelerate its growth, and especially as we've grown outside of the Midwest marketplace. So I would encourage you to do that. And so now we're at a point where we're scaling our business. We went from Cincinnati we added a few markets basically in our Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana area. And then in May, we expanded to 12 new cities. So we're in 17 cities across America. That has been huge. And I think one of the things that I don't think any of us anticipated, like the impact of running a marketplace for jobs in 17 different cities, all of the different time zone issues and culture issues. We're really big on thinking about how our product can really impact individuals. So empathy is a big part of our business. So one thing that I would always encourage is you're expanding into new markets or new areas. Think about putting yourself in the shoes of your customer and or a potential employee, and thinking about, what do they see every day? How do they commute? How do they compute? What does that look like? Because from there you can really start to develop marketing, ways to connect to people in such a different way. But you can also think about, okay, well, an employee would probably have to commute an hour. That doesn't make sense. So how do we create a different environment for them? And so for us now, scale has been, just about 6 months, 8 months along, and we're learning a lot along the way, and that's okay. We don't plan to be perfect for anyone, although we are working very, very hard to make Tilr not only a household name, but also show the impact that our company can make when you really start to think about your talent differently, including for your own environment. So we actually have hired quite a lot of people from our platform, where we've allowed our algorithm to make that match and for an individual to come and work for us directly. So it's been a great way to think about talent when you're in such a tight market, when you're competing against companies that can pay triple, quadruple what you could ever dream of. But you find individuals that are willing to do really cool things and to really want to make their mark. So as you're scaling, you're going to stretch, right? So I'm going to do something a little silly. Can you all stand up? You guys are awesome. You jumped up fast. Okay, so we're going to do an exercise. Not really exercise. I don't want to exercise in heels. But I want you guys to stretch and touch your toes, if you can. And then stand back up. And then reach back down again. Okay. So the second time you went down, did most of you actually reach a little bit farther? So somebody said no, but most of you guys said yes. So you can sit down. But what I wanted to point out is that, as a startup, you're going to stretch farther than you ever thought possible. And every moment in your day is an opportunity to go a little bit farther. And just trying to touch your toes, you do it once, and you're like, man, that didn't work out. And the next time you got a little bit closer, it's no different than what you're doing in a startup. And scale, that's what it feels like, and that's what it feels like for me every day. But you absolutely can do it if you surround yourself with amazing people that are passionate about your product, not just wanting to be a developer and clock in and clock out. I challenge you to think about people differently, because it makes all of the difference in the world. And what I've learned is that to be true to my own product and what we've actually developed is such a difference. And I really thank you guys for your time, and thanks for stretching. And I hope you guys are going out there and developing brilliant teams. Thanks.